What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fantasy Facts podcast presented by Fantasy Data. Right now, we are going to be jumping into the rapid rundown of week 9. We have every matchup, all the injury updates that are out there, along with start advice, projections from fantasydata.com, betting lines from bettingdata.com. It's an action packed show. I'm going to try and bring it all to you in 45 minutes or less. So we're going to jump straight into it. Not even going to throw up all the extra stuff in there. Make sure you follow the show at the Fantasy Facts. Follow me on Twitter at FFD at Home Dad. And we're jumping straight into it. We have a Thursday night game. Philly is traveling to Houston. This is the largest spread of the week. Philly is getting favored by 13.5 points. And quite frankly, it could happen, especially considering some of the injury news coming out of Houston. You have Nico Collins, who has already been ruled out of the game. You have a couple of defensive players already ruled out of the game. And you have Brandon Cooks with a wrist injury and a personal matter that is listed as did not participate, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with his official status for this week. And Joe's back. What's up, Joe? Hey, no more Cooper Rush stuff. But Joe, how are you doing? Welcome into the show. Glad to have you following along with us. Anyways, Houston probably not going to do too great in this matchup, unfortunately. It really puts a damper on guys like Davis Mills. It really puts a damper on one of my favorite players of the season so far, and that's Dameon Pierce. It's going to be tough for him to find much running room, especially with the Philly defense and the defense being able to key in on him versus having to guard Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins. If Brandon Cooks is out, Nico Collins is already out. It could mean a potential like DFS play for like a Brevin Jordan, but I'm really not looking forward to it. I'm probably going to start Dameon Pierce, mostly out of desperation because the running back landscape is a little bit desperate right now. On the opposite side of the ball, Jalen Hurts is balling out of control. He is a must start in every format that you play in, unless it's some kind of weird inverse opposite day type of format where good players are not good for that format. But I don't think that'd be very much fun. AJ Brown had a monster game. I am not expecting that again this week, but an absolute monster game in week 8. But you are definitely firing him up. You're firing up Miles Sanders. I'll even throw in there like Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert is optional plays here as well. The Houston defense is one that can get taken advantage of. The one thing I would be wary of just a little bit is that this game does end up being a blowout, and we see the Philly team just like rolling and turning down the pressure just a little bit in the third, fourth quarter because they're just absolutely destroying the Texans. I could see the Eagles. They have one of the highest implied point totals of the week at 29.5. I could see them hitting that 30 point mark there. Boston Scott gets a little bit of love maybe in this game, maybe a little bit of Kenneth Gainwell. Not necessarily guys that I'm going to be really excited about playing because that the narrative of they're just going to roll the Texans is like yes, it's probably going to happen, but are they going to roll them to the extent that they're going to start throwing in some of the backup guys? I don't know if I'm that comfortable making that play. I'm definitely not comfortable making that play in any type of managed roster league where I have to go, okay, I'm feeling good about Boston Scott, I'm going to throw him in there. So maybe in like a DFS thing, if I'm doing a bunch of lineups, I might feel a little more comfortable with that. All right, moving on to the next game. We have the Chargers traveling to Atlanta. This is another one of those games where we could see a little bit of anything coming out of this game. The Chargers are only favored by 3 points, which is to me a bit telling about what's going on with this Chargers team. They are dealing with a couple of injuries. Mike Williams is out. Keenan Allen re-aggravated his hamstring and is out as well. but there's still an over under. It's actually tied for the best over under of the week at 49.5 points, which to me gets me a little bit excited, especially for some of the plays that have not been, let's say, as lucrative so far this year, with guys like Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and even Tyler Algier. Cordell Patterson has been designated to return from IR, so it's going to be interesting to see what type of work he gets leading up to the game. Definitely keep an eye on that. If Cordell Patterson is a go, um, again, I'm probably going to throw him into lineups that I have him mostly out of running back desperation. We're at that point in the season where we have a lot of guys dealing with a lot of different injuries. So he could become a guy that you're rolling out there because of that desperation. Outside of that, I'm not really looking at anybody else. Yes, guys like Olamide Zaccheaus have been getting scores. Damier Bird has been getting some scores, but those are the I don't want to say fluky necessarily, but they're the less projectable type of scores because they're getting into the end zone, and that's what's inflating some of their fantasy points as of late, which is great. Except it's going to be really difficult for you to go ahead and throw them into your starting managed league kind of rosters, just because there's a lot of better options at that wide receiver position. On the other side of the ball, Austin Eckler and Justin Herbert are must start players. I would keep firing them up as long as you have them. And let me just double check. Mike Williams, sorry, they haven't been ruled out yet, but do not participate. I'm expecting them to be out. Just throwing that out there with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. I want to correct myself there. Not officially ruled out yet, but I don't like their chances of playing. Donald Parham got back to a full participant. I don't know if that does anything for you, but Gerald Everett is a really fine punt flex tight end that you can put in there, especially if you don't have one of the top guys. Or, and we'll talk about it in a little bit as we get to the Monday night game. If you have like a Mark Andrews and he's not able to go, you may want to put in a Gerald Everett if there's any type of lingering questionable tag with a guy like a bigger name guy, kind of like Mark Andrews, which it actually seems like he'll be okay. But just throwing that out there as a possibility. They do have, like I said, one of the largest over-unders. At 49.5, there are no games on the slate this week with an over-under over 50 points. But there are some pretty high implied points for individual teams. Both the Chargers and Falcons have over 23 point implied point totals. That's basically if you take the over under and take the spread and figure out like where the odds are saying the team should fall. They're both over 23 points, which makes it feel like you can find some really good steals there. Guys that you're going to pay up for, like Eckler and Herbert, but then guys you might be able to get a little bit of a deal on. All right, moving on to the next game, we have the Dolphins, the very, very busy at the trade deadline Dolphins taking on the Chicago Bears, who did put up a bunch of points to my Cowboys, but my Cowboys kind of rolled them that game with it. I think their combined total was almost 80 points, just points being scored all over the place. I could see this Miami Chicago game going in a very similar fashion. Miami did bring in Bradley Chubb to hopefully secure some of that defense for the Dolphins. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to play this week, and to what level he's able to play. But I really like Miami in this game again. They are traveling to Chicago. Chicago's getting a little bit of a boost, I feel like, in terms of odds for that. The Miami Dolphins are giving up 5 points. This is right in the middle of the over under at 45.5. So again, nobody has a really great point total this week, but this is one that you can definitely take advantage of. On the Miami side of the ball, you are playing Tyreek Hill, you're playing Tua, you're playing Jalen Waddle, and you're probably rolling out Raheem Mostert, again, depending on where you are in your league, where your team is really falling with your running back position. You're probably rolling out a Raheem Mostert. Jeff Wilson, who they picked up at the trade deadline, doesn't move the needle for me yet. I really want to see how he gets incorporated into the team. Jeff Wilson has always been a great injury fill-in type of player, but I want to see what they do for him in this Miami offense before I really get too excited about working him into any lineups. Gasecki has been having a little bit of a go here, especially as of late. But again, not somebody I'm overly excited about. I'd rather start a guy like Everett. I'd rather start a guy, even against a tougher matchup, which we'll get to eventually. It's literally the next game. I'd rather start a guy like Hayden Hurst. Again, with the questionable tag there, we'll see what happens with him. On the Chicago side of the ball, I do like Justin Fields. He has been playing very well as of late. It's going to be interesting to see how he continues playing. And I don't know what's going on with my lighting on the camera. It keeps kind of flickering back and off. I hope it's not bothering you the way that's bothering me. But Justin Fields has been playing very well as of late, getting points, some points throwing the ball down the field as well as points using his legs. He does get an addition here with Chase Claypool. Again, it'll be very interesting to see what happens because one of Justin Fields' best parts of his game, one of his most celebrated, is his deep pass, and Chase Claypool is a deep pass type of guy. So it'll be really interesting to see how they deploy him. Again, I'm probably not starting with much confidence. Guys like Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, even a guy like David Montgomery, his volume has really been hit or miss here. Miami does have a defense that can get exploited, but it's, a guy like Khalil Herbert, I feel like stands a better chance of really exploiting that defense. The question, though, is what type of volume is he going to get? It seems like the Bears are just fine with rolling out Montgomery a bunch of times and then letting Khalil Herbert come in and take off some of those rip plays. It's kind of turning into, and I would say to a much lesser extent, the Zeke Pollard type of situation where a lot of fantasy Twitter people and everybody else are going to be banging the drum to release Khalil Herbert, and I'm all for it. I love seeing those types of plays, but David Montgomery brings to the table that kind of steady gain of yardage and kind of steady force that a lot of real life NFL teams look for to continue moving the chains. It's not something that you care about in fantasy as much, except for when you start getting into like correlates of what moves to fantasy points. But I could definitely see Khalil Herbert having a nice day against this Miami defense. In terms of injuries, there's not a whole lot in terms of offensive players to keep track of. Jalen Waddle is back to a full participant. In terms of the injury report, there's a whole lot of the Miami Dolphins have just a whole list of offensive just players with limited participation. To me, that usually means we're going to see them in the game. And then on the Bears side, they have almost nobody on the injury report. So not much to take note of for that game in terms of injuries. Moving on to the surprising Carolina Panthers, getting a real boost with PJ Walker coming in and kind of finding a rhythm that just wasn't happening earlier on in the season, which makes me really nervous. Not nervous, but makes me feel kind of bad for Baker Mayfield because it's like PJ Walker coming in and just showing out kind of ends his career, it feels like, in the sense that he wasn't able to do what PJ Walker is doing. And maybe there's still some lingering injury concerns in there or something like that, but it feels to me like, at least in terms of fantasy, I am all done with Baker Mayfield in any type of form, and that's like dynasty super flex leagues where you're usually trying to hold on to quarterbacks. I am out on Baker Mayfield's completely at this point because of what PJ Walker has been able to do. Um, All right. Sorry, I was just reading one of the comments here. Eric jumping in. I just sat here and thought, what if Isaiah Simmons rushed off the edge like Pearson's? He did it in college. I just wonder, will it work? Um, yeah, I mean, it could work. Isaiah Simmons um, looks like he has the skill set to be able to do it. It's a real question about what is that defensive front really trying to do. And that's where it becomes tricky for people like myself and a lot of people that are kind of watching the game from afar. You can get an idea of what the defensive play was called based on where guys are going and based on what they're doing, but you can't know for certain what was that defensive call because somebody can get just out of position, and it happens all the time. We see busted plays happening all the time. I would like to see Isaiah Simmons coming off the edge more. It's definitely something that we could see, um, hopefully get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback because that always gets fun in terms of the defensive side of the ball. Thanks, Eric, for jumping in and throwing that comment in there. All right. Moving on to Carolina and Cincinnati, kind of running through it. PJ Walker has made DJ Moore startable. For a while, I was not putting DJ Moore into my lineups because he was just so bad with Baker. Now, DJ Moore had a phenomenal game. I personally think he cost the Panthers the game with the taking off his helmet celebration because that pushed the extra point back and the kicker missed it. Like, had he not done that, he probably would have made that extra point kick, and then it wouldn't have been all the shenanigans happening in overtime and missing another kick in overtime. But DJ Moore had himself a day, minus that one little mental mistake at the end. I am not super excited about starting PJ Walker, especially not in any type of one quarterback league. But DJ Moore does get himself into the conversation of he's back into my roster. He's back in as a flex play, definitely. In terms of running backs, Deonta Foreman, I'm throwing it out here. I could have been completely wrong. I was expecting this Panthers team to continue the struggles that they were having earlier on in the season, and Deonta Foreman seems like he's able to kind of come on. Granted, Hubbard was dealing with an injury. Hubbard is now a limited participant in practice. Deonta Foreman, the latest note is that he did not practice. So we're getting a little bit of kind of back and forth in their injury report at the moment. This could just be a day for Deonta Foreman to have a rest day. Hopefully that's what it is because he has been doing just fine. Hopefully, if you were able to scoop him up off the waiver wires, you're able to work him in. I wouldn't say much more than a flex play. Again, depending, and you'll hear me say it all show depending on your running back desperation level. If you have, Eckler, Derrick Henry, you don't need to necessarily worry about trying to force a Donta Foreman into your lineup. But not everybody's so lucky to have nice things like that. Plus, they were really highly drafted too, so unlikely for it to happen. In terms of receivers, outside of DJ Moore, I am not going to play any of those guys. Cincinnati on the other side of the ball, you're playing Joe Burrow. He's been outside of getting just rolled by Cleveland, which felt like came out of nowhere. Joe Burrow has been very consistent. He's a guy that you're going to work into your lineups. Joe Mixon is another guy that you're going to work into your lineups. T. Higgins is definitely a guy you're going to have worked into your lineups. He made a phenomenal catch to really save his fantasy day for a touchdown, just because the Bengals were so weird on Monday night. But I could definitely see him kind of coming back on. I can see the Bengals going, okay, with Chase being out, we need to rethink how we're running this offense just a touch. And I could see that being more Higgins, more Boyd, more Hurst. And honestly, a little bit more Mixon mixed in there as well, especially in a game against Carolina. Carolina does have a defense in the beginning of the year that was pretty solid, and so it'll be interesting to see how they match up, especially with a team with such offensive firepower as the Cincinnati Bengals. So it'll be interesting to see where we go there. Cincinnati is favored by 7.5 after they're after they're rolling against Cleveland. This line makes me a little bit nervous. I could see Cincinnati being at home, kind of going, all right, we just got our butt kicks. We need to come out and punch a weaker team right in the mouth and show them that we really should be, on like going back to the playoffs and really making a run for the Super Bowl again. Granted, a lot of things fell right for them to make that run to the Super Bowl, but I could see them being in that mindset, and possibly being able to cover that 7.5. But that makes me a little, just a touch nervous, especially with the over under only being 42.5. it's not something that gives me a ton of confidence. All right, moving on to the next team on the slate, and that is Green Bay traveling to Detroit. Green Bay is another one of those teams that we thought was going to be good over the course of the off season. The Yes, there was questions around the receiving core in Green Bay. There's still questions around the receiving core in Green Bay, but I don't think anybody thought that Green Bay would be struggling the way that they've been struggling. They did play a decent game against Buffalo despite the loss. Um, but it's been really hard to start guys on this team um, outside of Aaron Jones, really. AJ Dillon has been underperforming. Um, you have Romeo Dobbs, Alan Lazard, a plethora of injuries on the Green Bay side of the ball, especially in the receiving core. Lazard is still a limited participant, so hopefully he can get back in there. Christian Watson went left with a concussion and did not participate yet. We'll have to see where he goes with the concussion protocol. And then yeah, like they just haven't gotten what they've got wanted to get out of guys like Sammy Watkins and Amari Rogers. It's going to be tough to see where this team can kind of go. Romeo Dobbs has been a bright spot. He looks like he could be the number one receiver for Aaron Rodgers this week, which again makes me nervous about Aaron Rodgers, but makes me hopeful about Romeo Dobbs. We'll see what we can get out of him here. And Aaron Jones is, I've said it earlier in the season, he's the best receiver on this team right now and probably the most consistent option that you have. So I am all in for Aaron Jones, but especially against the Detroit defense that really gives up a ton of points to running backs. And then on the Detroit side of the ball, Jared Goff has been a fine fill-in streamable quarterback. I like rolling him out there if the opportunity suits it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I really like rolling him out there. DeAndre Swift still makes me a little nervous with his injury history. And just it, the way he gets taken on and off the field makes me a little bit nervous. But you have to kind of hope that he starts taking over as a lead back for the Lions. Unfortunately, he did not participate in the most recent practice. This could be trying to get him again up to speed, but it puts a guy like Jamal Williams as another fine DFS type of play. Not a guy I really want to force into lineups, but a guy that is just fine for DFS because if you do a couple of different lineups, you may get him getting into the end zone. You may get him taken over because Swift gets again pulled off the field at a random time. So Jamal Williams isn't a bad option there. Josh Reynolds, I see people kind of moving up. I see the tight ends getting a bit of a bump here. I'm not too in favor of that in any shape or form just yet. I'd really want to see what happens in terms of the offense before getting really excited about a tight end taking over because Hawkinson was traded from the Lions to the Vikings. All right. Thank you, Joe, throwing that out there. I realized that I did not do my buys already in the beginning. So thanks, Joe, for getting me back to that. On buy for week 9, there are definitely a ton of teams on buy right now. You have the Cleveland Browns. You have my Cowboys after a phenomenal win, taking a bye, giving them a little time to rest. We might see Zeke back after week 9. The Denver Broncos are on bye. The New York Giants, the surprising New York Giants, are on bye. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the San Francisco 49ers. So a lot of teams on bye this week. A lot of fantasy relevant guys as well. Pollard just had himself a phenomenal game. Really, the Browns in general had themselves a phenomenal real life game and a pretty good fantasy game as well. Denver has been super hit or miss, but you're missing guys like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and a bunch of running backs that got shuffled around there, which could mean something for Chase Edmonds, and it could mean next to nothing for Chase Edmonds. Just with his usage this year has been a little wonky. The Giants, just Saquon is out. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe you were playing like a Darius Slay, and it could mean good things for Wandale Robinson coming back in next week. The Steelers, you have guys like Najee, who just has been underperforming, but Najee, Pickens, Deontay Johnson, really you're kind of only startable guys there. Not rolling out Kenny Pickett really anywhere. And then San Francisco, Debo, CMC, and the streamable Jimmy Garoppolo in there as well, and also Brandon Ayuk as a play there as well has been fine, and all of those guys being taken off the slate here. So thanks, Joe, for reminding me to jump in there with those buys. All right, moving along. I'm going to try and speed it up just a touch here. We're a little bit behind schedule. Moving to Indy, traveling to New England. This is the Ramondre Stevenson and Jonathan Taylor show. That is where I'm going with it. That is my belief. Yes, Jonathan Taylor was just dinged with another ankle injury. Let me just check. I want to make sure I get his. I think he was either limited or did not participate. He did not participate, which that's why a lot of people were already going all over Deion Jackson as a replacement there. I'm going to throw this out there. Zach Moss was brought over in the Naeem Hines trade. It's ugly. It's if you have extra space on your bench, it's not a must go out and go get. But Zach Moss, everybody wanted him to be the thing in Buffalo, and Devin Singletary kind of held on to that lead role. If it's Deion Jackson, we might see Zach Moss come on and compete with him. It's not the same level of competition, I would say, and it could open the door for Zach Moss to do some stuff. Something to keep in mind, not something I'm saying you must go out and do because let's be honest, it's not. Like don't mishear what I'm saying. It's not something you must do, but it could be an opportunity to take advantage there. The Colts are another one of those teams who it looks like just, half their team is on the injury report. Most of it is on the defensive side of the ball. And actually, now that I scroll through it, Zach Moss did not participate also, which again, I still throw that out there as a potential. It could be just a did not participate because he's just coming over. He might be dealing with an injury, but we'll check that out there. On the other side of the ball, New England, Devontae Parker not participating. Other than that, not too much out there. Like I said, this is going to be hopefully a healthy Jonathan Taylor and Ramondre Stevenson show. You're starting Stevenson. You're probably starting Jacoby Myers. And then Mac Jones, maybe if you have him, you light him up. Who knows? It's not a great play, but it's also not a terrible play. He can get some run in this game. Damian Harris, Tyquan Thornton, again, guys that I would be much happier not having to start in a managed league, but are some guys that might be worked into like a flex position or something like that, depending on your team makeup. Maybe some guys, especially with Thornton, who has shown some explosiveness, could be a guy that you want to work in to some DFS lineups, depending. On the Colts side of the ball, Sam Ellinger is not a guy that I want to fire up at all. He didn't have a bad game. He just didn't pad the stat books. Like he didn't throw any interceptions. There was no fumbles. He just didn't do anything inspiring. But it was a very fine game management type of situation, which makes me feel fine for, Michael Pittman and possibly the Alec Pierce Campbell. Again, depending, maybe you work them in a flex. I'd probably be happier with Pierce and Campbell going into a flex over maybe a guy like Thornton, possibly depending on what happens with Devontae Parker and whether or not he's officially out come game time. That game actually does come in as the lowest over under of the week at only 39.5. So again, not a whole lot expected out of that game. That's why I really think, again, fingers crossed, we get a healthy Jonathan Taylor in there, because otherwise that game could just get real ugly from start to finish. All right, we go now to divisional rivals. Buffalo traveling to the New York Jets, a nice little interstate conflict here, even though they play in Jersey, but whatever. We won't get into that whole thing. Don't want Buffalo Mafia getting too excited. You are firing up Josh Allen. You are firing up Stephon Diggs. You're firing up Gabe Davis. You're firing up Devin Singletary. Even though I know a lot of people are really excited about Naeem Hines, I'm not ready to take that step just yet into really trying to force Naeem Hines into anything. I feel like it means more so that James Cook is not what the Bills wanted, but I see there. I don't see the drop in volume for Devin Singletary that would be necessary for Naeem Hines to be able to do what he was doing before. In Indy, Naeem Hines was getting 10% of the offense, roughly 10% of the offense or more when he was healthy. And in Buffalo, Zach Moss, James Cook, those were really the only two other running backs that they had. They barely combined for 10% of the offense, except for week one and week two when things were a little kind of all over the place in terms of the distribution of the ball. After that, it's been Devin Singletary with 20% or more of that offense. And I see that being kind of where they're going to go. And I don't see Buffalo really changing the way they're doing things. I don't see that offense changing that much. So I am not buying all into Naeem Hines. Again, I think he's a great big play opportunity. And I think Buffalo is a big play type of team, but I do not see him being a guy that you really can start on a week to week basis with any type of confidence that he's going to just show out for you. On the New York Jets side of the ball, yeah, it's not pretty. You're probably rolling out Garrett Wilson. You're probably rolling out Michael Carter. I might throw in like a Tyler Conklin in there. We have not seen James Robinson take over the way that some people expected that to happen, especially with Brees Hall going on IR. A lot of people thought Robinson would just completely erase Carter. That's not happening. I do not like Zach Wilson at all against this Buffalo defense, especially an opportunistic Buffalo defense. This could turn into a really bad game for the Jets really quickly. And that's why the spread is 12 and a half. It's a 12 and a half spread with an over under of 47 because the Bills are expected to score roughly just under 30 points and the Bills aren't expected to cross 20. So I could see this is one of those games. I bet the Bills at 10 and a half. That extra half point killed me last week. I could see the Bills being able to cover this 12 and a half point spread though against the Jets, especially more so due to turnovers than anything else, which is why in super flex leagues where I've had Zach Wilson, mostly out of desperation, I am perfectly fine with starting almost anybody else other than Zach Wilson in this game. I just, yes, there's a small line of probability where he could go off. I'm not excited. I'm not projecting that to happen though. All right. I don't believe there was too many injuries in this game that make much of a difference. Just doing a quick check to make sure. Yeah, there's not nobody really on that injury list that's coming out at the moment. Next up, though, is Minnesota and the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders are on a hot streak right now, winning their last three games. Tyler Haneke seems like he's doing just fine back there. Um, I don't mind firing him up this week. Obviously, I would rather fire up like a Kirk Cousins on the other side of the ball, but I don't mind firing up a guy like Haneke. Again, depending on who else you got out there, I would rather play him over a guy like Zach Wilson this week. Again, yes, there's a potential for Zach Wilson to go off, but against that defense, Bills defense, I do not like it. But for the quarterback play, I actually don't mind either of them in this matchup. You're definitely starting the star receivers though, with Justin Jefferson, and on the other side of the ball, Terry McLaurin. You're firing them up. The real question mark in this game is again going to be which running back gets carries, which running back gets involved, which running back gets involved on the important plays of the game. And it seems like more and more they're getting Antonio Gibson involved at those times. And I like Antonio Gibson in this setup. In this role, I wish they would get him just a little bit more involved, and we see a little bit more of Gibson at more receptions, more touches, and more of those kind of designed plays to get him the ball because that's where it seems like he's been excelling. And then Brian Robinson on more of those dive type of plays, stretch run types of plays, power offense types of plays. I think that's going to be more and more effective for the Commanders as they go. Um, I think you can probably roll Hawk out this week, especially because of the tight end landscape being a bit desolate. I don't mind rolling him out here with tempered expectations. Again, that first week of a change can be a bit hard to figure out what you're going to get. But the wide receivers, again, looking at percent of offense, you have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and then a whole just smorgasbord of average, mediocre guys getting a handful of targets. And I could see TJ Hawkinson kind of sapping a little bit from Thielen, sapping a little bit from those guys later on in the pecking order, and confirming or really verifying his own little set of targets there, his own little piece of the offense. So I don't mind Hawk again, especially with the tight end landscape being what it is. Not too much in terms of injuries to really take note of in this game. Again, just scrolling up to make sure I get everybody. Yeah, Thielen back as a full participant. Jahan Dotson did not practice. That is a guy that showed out really well earlier on in the season, but it's been injured for a little while now, and it would be nice to get him back to kind of see that rookie pace get back on. And JD McKissick did not participate as well. But again, this has been the Gibson and Brian Robinson. I don't even want to say show because that makes it sound like it's a positive thing. It's been the Gibson Robinson enigma, trying to figure out who that's going to be in that spot. All right, moving up next, we go. This is the last 1 o'clock game of the slate. We have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. And this game to me is a lot like the Indy New England game, where this should be the Josh Jacobs show and Travis Etienne show. I see both of those two having kind of these star performances in this matchup. Um, and the over under at 48 points, I think, is a little bit high. But the fact that the spread is only a point and a half, I think, just speaks to how close these two teams kind of are, and really the random direction that it could go. We've seen from both of these teams insane highlights and then insane lowlights, and there's no real great way of telling what we're going to get out of this game. And I think that spread kind of gives you a little bit of that, with the Raiders being favored just by a point and a half. Like I mentioned, you're firing up Josh Jacobs, you're firing up Devontae Adams, you're probably firing up Derek Carr in there as well. And a healthy Darren Waller, you're going to fire him up too. The question is, making sure that he is healthy. He is a limited participant right now on the week. So just make sure that he is healthy and ready to go. Um, the receiving, and this is one of the things that I mentioned earlier on in the season, in the offseason, this receiving core is a little bit interesting because there are some mouths to feed here. So it'll be interesting to see what we get going with Matt Collins, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, and Devontae Adams. Obviously, Adams is the key guy. Definitely stick with him. But then the other guys, you'll have to see what you get out of those guys. Matt Collins is back to being a limited participant. Devontae Adams also a limited participant, but I think he's going to be fine to play this week. On the other side of the ball, it's Travis Etienne, it's Christian Kirk, it's Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Zay Jones if you're feeling squirrely, but it's not a guy I'm really that excited to get in there. I think in terms of, who would you rather have, Zay Jones or Hunter Renfrow? I feel like it may be Zay Jones just based on volume that could go his way, especially in full point PPR leagues. I'd see that being a little bit of a better play there. But again, those are the types of difficult sit start questions that fire out to us when we have a clearer look at what these teams are going to look like Sunday morning if you have that going on. All right, jumping into the 4 o'clock games, I'm going to try and squeeze these all in as quickly as possible. We have Seattle traveling to Arizona. This is again tied for the highest over under at 49.5. We're expecting a lot of points to get scored in this game, with Arizona getting the slight edge in a 1.5 spread. You are firing up Kyler Murray. You're firing up DeAndre Hopkins. He has been an absolute volume stud right now. And I think you can throw in there Rondell Moore, Zach Ertz. The big question mark again comes to James Conner and his health. Again, if he plays, you're firing him up. He's going to be good if he's good to go, but you want to monitor that and just see where he's at in terms of that injury. And I just want to see what his latest is. He was limited participation in practice, so that is a pretty good sign. Hopefully, that he does play. On the Seattle side of the ball, there are a lot more injuries going on. You have DK Metcalf, who was injured but came back in and played. Was a surprise to me. And did all right. You have Lockett, who is a limited participant. You have Marquise Goodwin, who's a limited participant. You have DK Metcalf, who's a limited participant. And why not throw in another wide receiver? Penny Hart is also a limited participant, even though he probably wasn't on anybody's radar. But just it seems like the entire wide receiver core is only in a limited fashion at the moment, which hopefully they'll all be able to play. Gino is a go. He's been that kind of out of nowhere quarterback that's been helping out a ton of teams right now, including some of my own, especially in super flex leagues. Kenneth Walker finally getting his shine the past few weeks after the Rashad Penny injury. He is all good to go. And then I think you can start both Lockett and Metcalf if they're both healthy. I'm not starting really anybody else outside of that. And again, there should be points scored in this game, so there should be a lot of fantasy points, hopefully for you as well. All right, moving on to the Rams and the Bucks. This could be the letdown team Super Bowl, with both the Bucks and the Rams just being complete letdowns so far this season. I don't really like either quarterback in this matchup. Stafford has been extremely difficult to trust. Tom Brady has been extremely difficult to trust. The receivers for Brady have been a little bit difficult to trust at times. This could be a comeback game for both of these two teams, but even Vegas is not expecting that to happen. They have one of the lowest over unders of the week. They're tied for the second lowest at 42.5. Neither of these teams are really expected to score. I mean, the implied for Tampa Bay is 22. So Vegas is saying you might get to 3 touchdowns. And that's because Vegas is giving Brady and the Bucks a 3-point spread. So Mike Evans, if you have him, you're probably firing him up. Lenny Fournette, if you have him, you're firing him up. Chris Godwin, if you have him, you're firing him up. Julio Jones, probably not going into any lineups. Maybe a DFS play, maybe. I'm not that excited about it. I wouldn't really be targeting this game for many DFS plays unless you feel really strong about one or two guys in particular. And I think on the flip side of the ball is that one guy in Cooper Kupp. Again, I don't trust Stafford. Cooper Kupp did scare everybody with a little bit of an injury, but he did not participate this week. Keep an eye on him. It seems like he's going to be able to play. It looks like the injury was not that big a deal. So I would say Cooper Kupp, obviously, if you have him, he's in your lineup. And then I would say the other guy that I'm comfortable starting is Tyler Higbee. Again, he's just been a safety blanket for Stafford, and Stafford hasn't been great. Outside of that, I really don't want anybody else out there. Yes, Allen Robinson is the second highest projected wide receiver, but I don't like it. I don't like him. I don't like Ben Skorenik, even though Ben has had some games there where he's been able to score some points. Van Jefferson coming off of injury wasn't utilized at all in this past game. Ronnie Rivers, who had himself almost all the running back touches over Darrell Henderson. It looked like Darrell Henderson was dealing with an illness, so maybe they mitigated some of that due to that, due to that illness. But Ronnie Rivers got sent back to the practice squad this week. He might get activated again. Cam Akers is now hopeful to be able to come back and play and work things out. This Rams team is just a mess. I don't want anything to do with it outside of Cooper Cup and maybe some Tyler Higbee. And like I said, same thing with the Tampa side of the ball. I, again, don't really want much in any sense of that team outside of your main guys, Evans, Godwin, Fournette, and even Brady. I don't like him in this matchup, especially if the Rams can get pressure on him. This could be a real tough go for Brady and the Bucks. All right, moving on. We got two more games to go, and we're at the 45-minute mark, so we're gonna get them all in the next couple minutes. We have Tennessee Titans traveling to KC. KC is a 12-point favorite here, middle of the pack over under at 46.5. KC's implied point total is 29.25, which again, they're almost hitting that 30-point mark, and that's to be expected when you have Pat Mahomes slinging the ball back there. Kelsey is a must start. They have fantasy data has him projected at 19 PPR points. That is a huge day for a tight end. He's projected over a lot of wide receivers out there, and it's because it's Kelsey. He does exactly that. I don't mind firing up Juju Smith-Schuster. He seems to be getting more and more involved in the offense. MVS is a decent play there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not. This is one of those games, one of those teams where the running backs are really, again, just another enigma there with who's going to be getting the run. And they've played just about everybody in this backfield. They've played McKinnon, they've played Pacheco, they've played Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I am not starting Kadarius Toney yet. I do like having him on a couple of teams, especially ones where I need a wide receiver that can give me some upside, because Kadarius Toney could, not saying he will, not saying he is, but could fill a little bit of that Tyreek Hill void that they don't have with Juju, with MVS, in which Mecole Hardman was a guy that they thought would fill that role, but hasn't been able to as such. So Kadarius Toney, again, not firing him up now. Maybe sprinkle him in a little DFS, depending on how squirrely I want to get with it, but not firing him up yet. On the other side of the ball, I said Derrick Henry could be the RB1 because of his rushing upside last week, and he finished, I think it was RB3 in PPR points, just getting slightly edged out by some of those more PPR monsters like Kamara. Derrick Henry, though, is a go in this game. The KC defense is not known for its run stopping ability. I am firing him up. It looks like Tannehill is going to be back. Malik Willis did not show out the way that a lot of people were hoping for the rookie. And it looks like Tannehill's ankle injury is going to let him be able to play on the Sunday night game. So keep an eye on it just in case, but it really doesn't temper much of my expectations for Derrick Henry, and it really doesn't raise much of my expectations for guys like Robert Wood, and really anybody else in that Tennessee wide receivers core. They may need to sling the ball around to keep up with KC, but this could be one of those games where Twitter is all angry after the fact, going, "How did you only throw the ball 13 times when you're losing, man?" It's because your team is not a passing team, and you're not set up to do that. Yeah, that's basically it. All right, so yeah, wheels up, Derrick Henry. Everybody else, no. Last game on the slate, we are going to New Orleans along with the Baltimore Ravens. This is going to be a fun game, I feel like, for a Monday night. Two teams that are really trying to figure out what direction they're going in this season, and dealing with a variety of kind of bumps, bruises, injuries, let down play at times. Alvin Kamara is a must start. He looks like an an absolute stud. It'll be interesting to see who gets the start in this week. I haven't heard anything definitive yet, like we did last week, where it was like, no, Andy Dalton's the guy he's going to play. I haven't heard definitively yet. It looks like Dalton is going to get the nod, but we'll see more as that comes out. If Dalton gets the nod, it just makes me that much more excited about Kamara and his ability to get all those checkdowns. He had an insane amount of targets this past week in the double digits. We could see that happening again and again. I don't necessarily like Dalton as a quarterback play, but I really like Chris Olave. Michael Thomas looks like he's getting better. He still has a questionable tag on him, so keep an eye on that. It would be nice to see him get back into this offense because he did show a little bit of something earlier on, so it'll be good to see where he goes there. I'm not excited about Jarvis Landry, Jawan Johnson. If Andy Dalton starts at quarterback, I don't mind Taysom Hill. If it's Winston, Taysom Hill gets a little bit more wishy-washy for me. But Taysom Hill is one of those upside type of plays where I don't mind putting him into some rosters where I kind of need that upside, especially at the tight end position, because most of your tight ends are going to get you like 6 points, maybe, if you're lucky. But Taysom Hill has the ability to really pop off if he gets those chances. And the Saints seem to be more than willing to work him into those chances. So I don't mind Taysom Hill as a tight end play. And even though his projection is low, I actually don't mind starting him over some guys with higher projections because of that upside. And that does not mean start him over like Kelsey or Andrews or anybody like that. Andrews, as you mentioned, biggest name on the list here, especially with the injury. He left the game early last week. It looks like he avoided a major injury and he should be good to go, but definitely keep an eye out on this. And make sure you have a pivot. If you have Mark Andrews, you either want a Jawan Johnson, Taysom Hill, or I mean, I'm not sure who you would take as the backup tight end on the Ravens, but you want to make sure, well, likely he's probably already scooped up. But if he's not, make sure you have him as a backup, just in case Andrews cannot go. You're starting Lamar Jackson. His rushing upside is just undeniable. And you're probably starting Devin Duvernay, especially with Rashad Bateman out. And I mean, Demarcus Robinson has been getting a lot of ads, especially in a lot of fantasy leagues. I'm not too excited for that. The big question again will be the running backs here, with Kenyon Drake, Gus Edwards, seeing kind of who gets that run. Again, I feel like that's more. I say it probably too much, but I feel like it's more of a DFS play where I'll put one guy in one lineup and I'll do the same lineup with the other guy in, because somebody is probably going to get some work, and get a sizable amount of work and pop off, but it's going to be really difficult to say that's the guy that's going to do it or that's the guy that's going to do it, which to me means that they're sittable if possible, depending on your team makeup, in any type of managed league. All right. I thought I was going to go through this one a lot faster, especially with so many people on by, but we are way over time at 53 minutes. So we're going to close it out real quick. Make sure you follow the show. We are the Fantasy Facts on Twitter at the Fantasy Facts, presented by Fantasy Data. Make sure you check them out. You'll get yourself 20% off of your subscription if you use the promo code FACTS. That's FAQS, like the show. Also, go ahead and check out Underdog. If you're not already playing it, it is a phenomenal game to get into. They have everything you could possibly want. Use the promo code FACTS, again, FAQS, and you'll get yourself a 100% deposit match up to your first $100 deposit. Whoo! And that is all, ladies and gentlemen. I will catch you on the flip side.